The Atlanta Hawks season is officially over, but there's a lot of great things to look forward to this offseason, so let's get into it. What is going on, Hawks Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Hawks Fan TV. I'm your host, AC. Hope you guys are having a great day out there so far. As you can see by the title of the video, we will be discussing all of the offseason moves that I hope the Atlanta Hawks make. We'll get into what we should do with John Collins, some free agents that we need to target, the cuts and trades that we need to make, and all that good stuff. Now, before we get into all of that, I am joined by a very special guest with me today. He is one of the co-founders of SportsTalkATL.com, a big-time sports publication here in the city of Atlanta. If you haven't checked it out, I will encourage you guys to do so. I will link the website in the description below. But yeah, I am joined today by Jake Gordon. Jake, welcome to Hawks Fan TV. How are you?
I'm excited, man. It's it wasn't the end of the season that we wanted, but there's a lot of hope for the future, and it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason. There's a lot of big decisions to make.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, man. There's so many things that I want to get into this video that we probably don't have enough time to. But I know that the biggest thing right now that's hanging over our heads right now is the John Collins conundrum. Is he a max player? Are we going to let him walk? Are we going to match any offer? Are we going to sign and trade him? There's a lot of different options that we can do. And thank God that I'm not Travis Schlenk because I don't have to make that decision. But let's just say if we did, Jake, I'm going to open up the floor to you, sir. What would you do with John Collins, and what do you think we should do?
So I think the extension that the Hawks offered him last offseason, the 4 years, $90 million, I thought that was perfectly reasonable. I'd be willing to go above that number. The $110, $115 million range, that's $28 million a year. I would be willing to dip into that, but mainly because of the way the NBA salary cap works. Everybody knows the NBA, how they do their salaries is pretty weird. The NBA does have a hard salary cap at $112.4 million. But they have the luxury tax, which goes up to $136 million, a little bit over that, and you can dip into that to re-sign your own players. So if the Hawks were to let Collins go, and let's say Chris Dunn accepts his $5 million player option, which is probably going to happen, and they'll pick up the qualifying offers on Nathan Knight and Skylar Mays. Those are $3 million for both of those. You're only looking at about $16 million to spend if you let Collins go. You're not saving a ton of money, at least in 2021. But using his bird rights, which does allow you to dip into that luxury tax threshold, the Hawks can give him, the deal that he wants. I assume he's probably going to get something about $28 million, maybe more. Maybe some middling team would be willing to overpay for him. But with the Hawks do that, they also get the non-taxpayer mid-level exception. That's worth about $9.5 million. That's a really pricey exception to sign a good player, and they still would have about $10 million. As long as they sign John Collins last, that's the key. You push up against the hard cap, and then you dip into the luxury tax with Collins. I think bringing him back is a no-brainer. You're going to have more money to spend. You're going to keep a franchise building block, and I just don't see them letting Collins go. It doesn't even make sense financially to let him go. So I think bringing him back is a no-brainer. He's super efficient. He's super talented. And, there's still times when you look at him and you're like, this guy is still figuring it out. He's still developing. He could still get better. And so I'm comfortable handing him a 4-year deal that's close to max money. I guess we'll have to see. Somebody is going to offer him a big contract in free agency. I don't know if it'll be like Miami, Dallas.
He's getting offered. You know it.
Oh yeah, Miami, Dallas, Charlotte. All these teams. Somebody's going to give him a massive deal. Maybe even like Orlando. I don't know. They have a ton of forwards, but I don't see any situation in which the Hawks let Collins go. I think they bring him back, and I think it's about a 99.9% chance that they do.
Yeah, I agree, because the biggest thing that I look at here, Jake, is if we don't re-sign John Collins, are we going to upgrade at the 4 position? And the answer to that question is absolutely not. There's not a single free agent out there right now at the power forward spot that's better than John Collins. Now we could go something in-house and maybe even experiment with like moving DeAndre Hunter into the 4 slot, which could definitely work considering he's roughly the same size as him, maybe like 10 pounds lighter. But DeAndre Hunter's such a good athlete that that honestly wouldn't even mind if we did that. But it would be foolish for us not to re-sign him simply because We just made the Eastern Conference Finals. He's a great locker room presence. Like, he's one of my favorite players personally. I just love his attitude, love his spirit, and you can tell by all of his interviews that he's done, like, he wants to be an Atlanta Hawk for life, basically. Now, you said something interesting, Jake. You said that some teams might, he's probably going to teeter around that 25 to 30 million a year range. Do I personally think he's a $30 million player? Absolutely not. But if one of the teams, like you said, Dallas, maybe San Antonio, who knows, offers him a max deal like $30 million a year, we're going to be handcuffed pretty tightly. So that's going to be interesting. But the beauty of this is he can still decline or accept whatever he wants, and I hope that he takes like 20 to 25 mil. Like, I don't want to go anything over 25.
Definitely, and I think worst case scenario we see a sign and trade, which I don't want, but that's better than absolutely nothing. If you look at the Kings letting Bogdanovich go for absolutely nothing when the Hawks had a first round pick on the table for him. I think at worst case scenario you see a sign and trade, and maybe it ends up like we got a sign and trade with Washington. We're bringing Bradley Beal here, and we're sending more stuff to Washington. That's a little different, but I don't see something like that happening. I think worst case scenario, it's a sign and trade, and really, I don't think you get equal value back. And if you do lose Collins at some point, maybe you have to look to the trade market. Maybe you look for a guy like a Pascal Siakam. And I think it's easier to just bring him back. You'll have more money to spend. You'll have that exception. You'll have the $10 million in cap space to spend before you got to bring him back, around that number. But I just think re-signing Collins is priority number one, and then everything else, the team is almost complete at that point. So, re-signing Collins is really just the biggest thing you got to check on.
Yeah, I agree. I don't love the idea of a sign and trade just because, like you mentioned, we don't get any equal value back. Matter of fact, we'll probably lose value in a sign and trade. If I remember correctly, I think when Jimmy Butler did the sign and trade, what was it, with the Sixers? Yeah, I think it was with the Sixers to go to the Heat. I mean, that deal, they got Josh Richardson back. So clearly a discrepancy in the value. So I hope we don't do a sign and trade. But yeah, luckily we're not Travis Schlenk and we don't have to make those decisions. Moving on. Now, let's say best case scenario, the Hawks do re-sign John Collins. We basically roll out with the same squad, which I hope we do. But I'm also not opposed to improving the roster, whatever that means. So when we look at free agents this year, it's not a stacked free agent class, but who are some free agents that seem interesting, seem enticing to you, that you think could mesh well with this current roster?
Hey, with the expectation that Collins is back, the first two guys I'll go with, I will say that you probably can only get if Collins doesn't sign back. Tim Hardaway Jr. played fantastic in the playoffs, shot over 40% from three, played really good defense. It's funny because we always remember him. He was part of the trade for, I think, Kelly Oubre back when the Hawks were really bad. And then, they got rid of Hardaway, but he played very well in Dallas. He's a free agent. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. could be a fantastic pickup. Norman Powell kind of goes into that same breath. Not the same defender, but he's a really, really good bucket getter.
I do love Norman. I do love Norm.
I thought there was potential that we traded for him at this trade deadline, but of course that never came to fruition. But there's a couple names out there, guys that I like that can just fill a role. You look at some guys that can play 3 and D, big men that can rotate in. I look at a guy like Glenn Robinson III. Good shooter for the corners. Good defense. Just a solid wing presence. You're probably going to be replacing Solomon Hill. You're probably going to be replacing Tony Snell. I think you can, for a little bit more money, you can get a massive upgrade in that department. No disrespect to those guys, obviously, but, you even look at a guy like, I'm going to butcher his name, Hamidou Diallo from Detroit. I don't think they end up letting him go. I'm pretty sure he's a restricted free agent, but he has so much potential. And you look at how Nate McMillan has unlocked some of the potential with Cam Reddish, and DeAndre Hunter, who's been pretty consistent, but he looked improved. That's another big wing you could go after. Long, athletic, good defender. That archetype. And, backup point guard may have to be addressed. We'll see what happens with Lou Williams. TJ McConnell, good defender, not much of a three-point shooter, but I think he shot over 50% from the floor, averaged over 7 assists off the bench. That's not bad. I'll take that all day. Gorgui Dieng is probably my favorite. Really good shot blocker, really good defender, can step out and shoot from three. that would probably be my favorite pickup if we could just have one guy. But there's guys like Daniel Tice, Rashawn Holmes, and maybe even Paul Millsap. Maybe we get a Paul Millsap reunion. But I think focusing on guys who can defend on the interior, and maybe step out and hit a three, I think that would be best for the Hawks.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, Jake. I'm a big fan of those wing elite 3-and-D players. It's like football, man. You can never have enough elite wing players.
Exactly.
Just like you can't have enough cornerbacks and edge rushers. So, and right now the modern NBA, like the wing position is essentially the most important position in basketball. I mean, they're so versatile. Kevin Huerter is a great example of that. He can play the 1 through 3 if you need a primary ball handler, a defender, a shooter like Kevin Huerter. We have, fortunately for us, we have like 3 or 4 guys that are really good at that. Bogey, Huerter, Cam, and DeAndre. So we have some wiggle room here, but I'm looking here at the free agent tracker for this offseason. And yeah, there's not a whole lot of names. Of course, you got Chris Paul, Kawhi Leonard, Kyle Lowry, like those are kind of the big names, but all of those guys are old, minus Kawhi. You had some interesting names, like the TJ McConnell one I absolutely love. I think he would be a perfect backup point guard on this current team, just because he gives you that playmaking, like you said. He 7 assists off the bench and limited minutes is amazing. He's a absolute dog on the defensive end, and he could honestly even play some of the 2 next to Trey, just being kind of that primary point of attack defender on the best opposing guard. So I love TJ, and he's also probably going to be relatively cheaper than some of these other players. Tim Hardaway Jr., love him. Was a big fan of his game when he played for us, but he might be a little bit too expensive for my liking. Norman Powell, I absolutely love. I thought very much like you, we might make a trade to get him kind of as our secondary ball scorer to pair with Trey. Another name that I want to throw at you is Gary Trent Jr. He's a free agent. Yeah. So he showed out when he got traded to, the Trailblazers? No, the Raptors. The Raptors. So yeah, he showed a lot of upside. He's still a really young player. I think he's only like 24. So he could be a great piece. But yeah, who's your like ideal target? If we could get one realistic person, who would you pick?
Man, it honestly might be Gary Trent Jr. I'm not sure if he's restricted. I think they would match if he is. I had it pulled up a second ago. Yeah, he is restricted. I don't see Portland letting him walk, man. As poor defensively as they were in the playoffs, I don't see how they can afford to let him walk, especially if they trade CJ McCollum, which, that's yet to be seen. But, I think Gorgie Dieng would probably be my top guy, but somebody I could really see the team bringing in. Avery Bradley has a team option with the Rockets, and obviously the Rockets are god-awful. They're probably going to turn it down. He didn't shoot very well last season, but man, if he can stay healthy, we've seen what kind of defense he can play.
Oh yeah.
I think he would be a solid pickup. But if I think we'll see guys like James Ennis. He could be in play. Jeff Green might even be in play. Rudy Gay. I think they'll try to bring on someone like Solomon Hill, but a little bit better than Solomon Hill. But I think if you had to say one guy, I would probably go Gorgie Dieng, and if not him, I don't know. Rashawn Holmes is appealing. He's not much of a shooter.
I love Rashawn Holmes' game.
I know. He's such a great athlete on the interior, great shot blocker.
I feel like every time he plays against us, he hits that little mid-range floater that, like, every time he shot it would just go in every single time, and it was the most frustrating thing to watch ever.
Yeah, and I feel like him and Trey would work so well together just for that reason. I think it's got to be a big man. I would probably go Gorgie Dieng. I would probably go Rashawn Holmes, one of those 2 guys. But I do have a sleeper name for you, and obviously everybody knows this name, but Harry Giles.
The forgotten.
The forgotten former lock for a number 1 pick. Obviously had his knee troubles. He shot almost 35% from 3 last year. He's only 23.
Wait, remind me, what team does he play for again?
The Sacramento Kings.
Oh,
That's
the
probably
Kings.
why you don't remember.
Okay, yep, that makes sense.
But if the Hawks go shopping in the bargain bin, Harry Giles, he could be a guy. 23. He's not great defensive. He gets into a lot of foul trouble. But, it's one of those things where you wonder if Nate McMillan could get a hold of that raw talent, what could he become? That's just me, just spouting off. But, I thought it was an interesting, could be an interesting team and player fit.
Yeah, I love that. I honestly didn't even think about Harry Giles. Like you said, a lot of raw potential that can be unlocked somewhere deep down inside. Another last player that I want to focus on is, and this is a player that I was advocating for us to get at the deadline, was Lonzo Ball. How do you feel about Lonzo?
See, here's the thing: is I don't dislike. It's funny. I'm going to go on a tangent for a second, but I saw a tweet where someone was like, "I gauge your basketball IQ based on what you think about Lonzo Ball," and I think it holds true. If I remember correctly, he had a terrible start to the season. After last year, he was very, very, very good, especially shooting wise. But if you talk about bringing on a guy like Lonzo Ball, if he can shoot to the level that he does, you can play him at the 2 guard as a starter. He's a lockdown defender. I don't think that would be a horrible pickup at all. I think we're probably out of his price range. That's my only issue with him. But adding Lonzo Ball next to Trae Young, people probably think at first, well, they're both, that's kind of an awkward fit. They're both like true point guards, awkward fit. I don't think it would be as awkward of a fit as people would think. I think Lonzo would bring a lot of defense, a lot of playmaking, and that's what Nate McMillan's about. He's about making the extra pass. He's about playing team defense. And I think Lonzo would fit in very well with that.
Yeah, I agree. Like, he would be probably one of my ideal pickups, but like you said, there's no way in hell that I think we can afford him, unfortunately. But yeah, he's a great defender. Obviously can space the floor. He's improved so much as a 3-point shooter, and I think he's going to continue to improve those numbers. But the biggest thing is he's that secondary playmaker. Like, he's such a good facilitator. That might be the best aspect of his game, and just initiating, transition points, fast break points. Like, he's a great player. Like, he could easily start at the 2 next to Trae, or be a backup point guard. But yeah, I don't think he's going to come to Atlanta to be a backup. So yeah, that's probably a pipe dream.
But hey, you talk about court division. If you have Trae and Lonzo at the floor at the same time, like that's probably top 2 in terms of court vision. 2 of the best 5 guys in the entire league. So that would be very, very fun to watch. 100%.
Like, it would be incredible. And I honestly think, like, them 2 together could work. Like, they would almost pair perfectly together because, yeah, I mean, he can shoot very well from the 3. He can space the floor for Trae. And then, yeah, for moments where Trae doesn't need the ball, just give it to Lonzo and let him do his thing. But, yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. Although I will say, and 99% chance that Travis Schlenk and this organization probably roll out most of the same roster, minus, like, some exceptions of like Solomon Hill. I don't think we're going to see Solomon Hill back next year, but I wouldn't be surprised if we do. But I wouldn't be so shocked if Travis just pulled some crazy blockbuster deal in order for us to get a big time free agent. So that's going to be something interesting to keep an eye on. But yeah, we'll see what he does. So Jake, moving on to the third and final topic here, we got trades and cuts and signs. Who do you see on this current Hawks team right now that you don't think is going to be here next year?
Yeah, really with free agents, I don't see Tony Snell being back. Mr. 50-50-100, first player in NBA history, I know.
The legend.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see Tony Snell coming back. I don't see Solomon Hill coming back. I want to say Lou Williams comes back, but I don't see Lou Williams coming back, especially since he wants a multi-year deal, and we're talking about the Hawks having, Trae Young and Kevin Huerter both needing extensions this next coming offseason. Possibly Kevin Huerter, but obviously Trae. Brandon Goodwin, they have his bird rights on him. I think Brandon Goodwin would be perfectly fine to bring back on a cheap deal. They'll bring back Skylar Mays, they'll bring back Nathan Knight, and I think they'll bring back John Collins. So as far as cuts, I don't really see them. I think Bruno Fernando's money is guaranteed, so I don't think they would cut it. But if there is any player that they would cut, I think it would be him. As far as trades go, it's one of those things where everybody used to always look at the Hawks in their trade scenarios and say, we can give the Hawks a bunch of picks and a bunch of bad players because they're rebuilding. Like that's not the case anymore.
Exactly.
The only way I see the Hawks making a trade, if Bradley Beal says he wants out, which there's a complication with that because I think Bradley Beal, if he plays one more year in Washington, I think he qualifies for the Supermax, which I think he will take. So I don't think, as much as I would love to have Bradley Beal, I think he would be a picture-perfect fit on this team. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the Zion stuff is overblown, but obviously if Zion becomes available, you got to throw the kitchen sink at New Orleans to get him. And the last guy, me and my other co-founder, Chase Earl, we've talked about this. Damian Lillard. It's like obviously you're not giving up Trae Young for him, but I feel like if Portland says, Damian Lillard's available, I feel like you have to give him. You got to make him your best offer to go get Damian Lillard. If you do, you'll have the two best. I say this in jest a little bit, but you have the two best guards in the NBA. You got Trae and you got Dame. I love Damian Lillard. He's one of my favorite players, so I'm a little bit biased. And I don't think there's anybody in the league that can defend that backcourt if you're running out Trae and Dame at the same time. And by some miracle, you keep one of DeAndre Hunter or Cam Reddish. You got a staunch defensive wing. That's a team that nobody wants to see in the playoffs. But it's there's not a great trade market. The free agent market isn't great. I don't think the trade market's great right now either. I feel like a lot of the contenders have a lot of the good players, and there's only a few guys like the Bradley Beal that really stands out like that.
Yeah, great point. I will say I'm not the biggest Bradley Beal fan. Is he a good offensive player? Absolutely. But I just don't. He's not a winning player. Like we always talk about Trae and his knock of not getting it done, empty stats. Like in my opinion, Bradley Beal is the definition of empty stats player. The best success he's had is with basically John Wall carrying that Wizards team when he was over there. But we saw what Beal and the Wizards have done as him being kind of the primary guy, and he just and he plays no defense. I would be totally opposed to that. Getting Bradley Beal unless we just got him for super cheap. The Damian Lillard thing is funny because I've seen this on the Hawks subreddit group. I don't know if you surf that often, but there's some pretty crazy trade scenarios that these guys post up there, and there's a few folks that are advocating for Damian to come on. I think Damian Lillard's a great player. I'm a big fan of Dame time. I think there might be a little too much redundancy with Dame and Trae in the same backcourt just because they both need the ball in their hands basically to be effective. Don't get me wrong, it would be the most electrifying backcourt in the NBA if those two came together. But yeah, you would have to probably give up like Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter, and Cam Reddish to get Dame, which are like the three best young pieces. And I for one do not want to get rid of any one of DeAndre Hunter or Cam Reddish. So I think that's a pipe dream, but yeah, it would certainly be great to see. But yeah, like you said, the trade market is super slim right now, and I don't think adding Bradley Beal would make this team that much better. Matter of fact, it'll probably make it a little bit worse considering what we would have to give up for him. Dame, I wouldn't be opposed to, but I just don't want to give up all three of those players plus like a first-round draft pick because that just super handcuffs us.
Yeah. I've talked about which players I thought were quote-unquote untouchable. And I don't think besides Trae that any of them are untouchable, but what it boils down to is a combination of players. It's like, hey, you can get one of Cam Reddish, one of DeAndre Hunter, one of Kevin Huerter, one of Bogdanovich. It's not necessarily saying that, you can't trade this guy, you can't trade this guy, but there's a combination that goes into it. And if they do decide to make a trade this summer, I just don't think there's any way you can get rid of Cam Reddish and DeAndre Hunter. You have to keep one or the other.
Oh, 100%. You have to. Ideally, like in the future, I want to see Cam and DeAndre both starting together. Like I think that's the future for the Hawks. Like you have Trae at the 1, Cam Reddish at the 3 or 2, and then DeAndre Hunter at the 3 or the 4. But like they're such versatile defenders. They're so valuable. Like I mentioned earlier, like those wing players are so important to a team, and we could arguably have like two of the best young wing players in the NBA if Cam Reddish actually hits his full potential. And I think Nate can unlock that, so I'm excited to see Cam under a full, real offseason under Nate McMillan, and I think we're going to be destined for some great things. I wouldn't be opposed to trading Kevin Huerter and John Collins, though, for one of those types of players. Like I think those two are the most expendable, but we have to keep Cam and Dre like on this team at all costs. Like those are my three untouchables: Trae, Cam, and DeAndre.
Yeah, and I definitely understand where you're coming from with that too. And everybody, I posed the question on Twitter, and I got a lot of interaction with it. A lot of people were saying Kevin Huerter is untouchable, and I was like, look, I love Kevin Huerter. No disrespect to him at all. He's a fantastic player. He saved our skin in Game 7. But that's exactly why people are saying that, is because he saved our skin in Game 7. He has a fantastic mid-range game. I think this season he kind of finally realized, like, hey, I'm bigger than everybody else, and I can shoot. Let me go into the lane and make something for myself. And, that's great, but at the end of the day, he's still a career 11-point per game scorer and shoots about, 37, 38% from 3. I think he can take that next step. But Kevin Huerter is by no means untouchable. And if you're talking about a sign and trade with John Collins, if you throw in Kevin Huerter to get, a star player or, two really, really good players, two good role players, I don't think that that's just out of the conversation. I don't think you can just completely shut it down and say, oh, Kevin Huerter's off the table. But Cam Reddish, DeAndre Hunter, you better be coming back. If either one of those guys is getting traded, you better be coming back with a true superstar because, Onyeka Okongwu, he can replace, John Collins for the most part. I don't think his shooting will be up to that level, obviously, but, Gallo's there. But, there's nobody that can replace Cam Reddish or DeAndre Hunter on this team.
Yeah, I completely agree. Interesting thought that I've seen on Twitter recently. Would you trade DeAndre Hunter, Kevin Huerter, and a first-round draft pick for Jaylen Brown if that was available?
I think you do that before. Is Danny Ainge the GM now? No, Brad Stevens is the GM. They switched it up. I can't remember.
They did, yep.
I think you do that before he even hangs up the phone. I love DeAndre Hunter. I believe in his potential. I think he has a lot of Kawhi Leonard in his game. Not that he'll ever reach that level. But Jaylen Brown is a bona fide superstar and a great defender. So I don't think you're losing much defensively. And Jaylen Brown can give you 30 on almost any given night. So I think that's a no-brainer. The first-round pick, it's in the 20s. Draft picks and draft picks. I don't think the Celtics would do it, but if I'm the Hawks, I got to say that's an automatic yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm on the fence just because when you look at the trajectory of DeAndre Hunter and Jaylen Brown, Dre has actually performed better on that same timeline than Jaylen Brown did in his first couple of years. So, but yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about what have you done instead of the potential. So,
True.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Like I love DeAndre so much, and I'm so biased that I don't know if I would do that, but then again, like I wouldn't not do that at the same time.
Yeah, it's funny too because Jaylen Brown, I remember his first 2-3 years, I was like, oh, Jaylen Brown's a bust. What a terrible pick because he averaged like 12 points a game.
Yeah.
And then one day he just clicked. And you know who I think that's going to happen for? I think it's going to happen for Cam Reddish. I think Cam Reddish and Jaylen Brown are fairly comparable players. My thing is with Cam Reddish, I don't know if you ever read the reports from The Athletic. Apparently Lloyd Pierce and Reddish had a strange relationship,
Yep.
to put it lightly. So I won't dive into that. I don't know anything about that. But under Nate McMillan, I think Nate McMillan is the perfect coach to get the most out of Cam Reddish. And, we lost Game 6. We lost Game 6, but we saw what happened. Cam Reddish was playing lockdown defense. He went 6-7 from 3. And if that's something you can get every night, that's a guy. That's a superstar. Exactly. So I don't think that trading Cam Reddish is the solution for anything. I think Hunter is a little more expendable than Reddish just because he's a little bit older and probably a little more of a finished product. But either guy, if you're not getting a superstar back, I don't think you can trade either guy just because of the potential that they have.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, man, so many more things that we can get into, Jake, but don't want to hold you for too much longer. It was great having you on. Final thoughts before I let you go here. Where do you see us next season? Do you see us being back in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Finals, first-round exits? What are your thoughts?
Man, I'm a bit of a jinx, so I should probably just say we aren't going to make the playoffs. But truthfully, let's say, we're playing NBA 2K and I just flip the injury switch off. I think we're the second seed in the East. I think teams around the league will make adjustments to Nate McMillan now that they've kind of gotten the feel for what he is. But I think the Hawks on paper, they're still better than the Knicks. They're still better than the 76ers, as currently constructed, obviously. I think they're better than the Bucks, honest to God. We lost that series. Trey was hurt. DeAndre Hunter's out. We could have won that series fully healthy.
100%.
Call it a homer take, call it whatever. I still think the Nets were better than the Bucks. Obviously, Kyrie Irving and James Harden were both injured. But I think they're the second best team in the East behind the Bucks. And I think they're going to be contending for the finals again next year. And if they got a matchup against the Nets, I think it'd be a really fun series to watch. Obviously, probably not going to work out that way. If you told me to predict the season last year, I wouldn't have said the Hawks and the Bucks would be in the Eastern Conference Finals. I definitely wouldn't have picked the Suns. So
yeah, crazy season this year.
Exactly. Pending that everybody is healthy, I think the Hawks are a 4 seed at worst. I think they're going to be right back where they were contending as long as they bring John Collins back.
Yeah, completely agree. I think this team's only going to get better, and praying to God that the injury bug does not plague us again next year. But I think if we roll with the same squad minus maybe a couple of minor additions or subtractions, I still think we're easily a top 3 seed. And I'm with you, Jake. If even if we didn't have DeAndre Hunter, if we just had a healthy Trae Young, we win this series when we should be playing the Suns right now. But that's neither here nor there. But yeah, man, here's to a exciting offseason and looking forward to a new 2021-2022 Hawks season. The season's right around the corner here. Like in a blink of an eye, it's going to be preseason, and then we're back at it again. It was a pleasure having you on, Jake. Before I let you go here, where can all the listeners find you on social media?
Absolutely, and thanks for having me, man. This is great. But you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Can'tGuardJake, and of course at SportsTalkATL on Twitter, and our website, SportsTalkATL.com.
Perfect. Well, Jake, it was a pleasure having you on. Hopefully we can do more videos like this in the future, and let's go Hawks, baby.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.
You too.
Whew. So, you guys heard the man, Jake from Sports Talk ATL. Thank you so much for joining, Jake. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, ladies and gentlemen. A lot more offseason moves that the Hawks are going to make. We still have the NBA draft coming along. I'll do a video regarding the draft. I'm actually having one of the beat writers for the VCU athletic department coming on the show tomorrow to talk about one of my favorite draft players, Nashawn Highland, aka Bones. So really excited about that. Tune into that. And yeah, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you guys like daily and weekly Hawks content like this. I'll be doing videos like this all off season going into the new regular season. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day, and let's go Hawks, baby.